On a warm afternoon in the 2nd century CE, a merchant could leave a dusty town in Roman Spain, follow a paved road across Gaul, sail from a busy port in southern Italy, and step off a ship weeks later in Alexandria, never once leaving the jurisdiction of the same empire, using the same coins, protected, in theory, by the same laws. To him, this might just feel like the way the world is. To us, looking back through the pages of history, that world has a name: the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. But what did that peace actually mean? Who felt it? Who paid for it? And why did it seem so stable, until it suddenly wasn't? In this episode, let's take down the thick volume labeled The Principate from the archive shelf, dust it open around the name of Augustus, and trace the story of the Roman peace, not as a slogan, but as a lived experience. What was the Pax Romana? The phrase Pax Romana is Latin for Roman peace, and it usually refers to a long stretch of relative stability in the Roman Empire, often dated from the rise of Augustus in 27 BCE to the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE, roughly 2 centuries, in schoolbook summaries. It sometimes appears as a golden stripe on a timeline, a calm period between the chaos of the late Republic and the crises of the 3rd century, a time of good emperors, safe roads, beautiful art, and prosperous cities. There's truth in that. But like most neat labels in history, it's also misleading. It was never perfectly peaceful. There were wars on the frontiers, revolts in provinces, palace coups in Rome. It was not peace for everyone, for enslaved people, for conquered nations. For rebels, it could be brutal. It was more of a system than a tranquil mood, a way of organizing power that produced long-term stability at the center of the empire. So to understand the Pax Romana, we need to ask, peace compared to what? Before the peace, a republic in chaos. If you flip a few pages back in the archive, you find a very different Rome. The late Roman Republic, from about the mid-2nd century BCE to the rise of Augustus, was a period of intense, often bloody turmoil, civil wars, political assassinations, riots in the streets, and generals turning their armies against Rome itself. Wealth from conquest flowed into the hands of a few powerful families. Small farmers were pushed off their land. Enslaved labor flooded the economy. Traditional republican institutions, the Senate, the popular assemblies, the system of annual magistrates, were overwhelmed by scale and inequality. Ambitious men used violence, bribery, and demagoguery to seize power. Marius versus Sulla, Caesar versus Pompey, Antony and Octavian versus the assassins of Caesar, and finally Octavian versus Mark Antony and Cleopatra. By the time Octavian, the future Augustus, defeated Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BCE, Rome had endured almost a century of recurring civil war. Romans were exhausted. Veterans, merchants, peasants, all lived with the constant possibility that an army might march through their homeland under a Roman banner. For people living through that peace didn't mean abstract philosophical calm. It meant no more Roman armies fighting Roman armies. No more entire regions crushed as collateral damage in internal struggles. Augustus understood this perfectly. After his victory, Octavian faced a delicate problem. How do you end civil war? By becoming effectively a monarch, when your entire political culture is built on hating kings. His solution was one of history's great political balancing acts. He carefully shaped a new system, later called the Principate, that preserved the appearance of the old republic while concentrating real power in his hands. He presented himself not as a king, but as princeps, the first citizen. He restored power to the Senate and people of Rome while keeping key offices, military command, and provinces under his control. He demobilized or resettled tens of thousands of soldiers, creating veteran colonies and shrinking the risk of restless armies roaming Italy. He reorganized the provinces into imperial territories under his command and senatorial provinces left under Senate administration. This new structure had a clear promise: no more civil wars as long as power flows through the emperor. And Augustus tied that promise to a broader message that his rule was bringing order, prosperity, and security, a new age after chaos. Altars were raised to Pax, the personified goddess of peace. Buildings and monuments celebrated stability. Poets and artists crafted an image of Rome as a world-ordering power, the bringer of peace, a peace that came from Roman victory, peace through domination, not through equality. A slogan alone could not keep such a vast empire steady. The Pax Romana rested on concrete foundations. Under Augustus and his successors, Rome maintained a large professional standing army, around 25 to 30 legions, supported by auxiliaries, stationed mostly on the frontiers, the Rhine and Danube, the eastern borders with Parthia, the deserts of North Africa, and later in Britain. Soldiers served long terms, were paid by the imperial administration, and received discharge benefits from the emperor's authority. This turned the army into an imperial institution whose loyalty, in theory, belonged to the throne. The army deterred external enemies, suppressed major revolts, and quietly reminded provincial communities who held the final say. If you trace the Pax Romana on a map, you mostly trace roads and sea routes. Stone-paved highways allowed rapid troop movement, trade, and official communication through the cursus publicus. Ports like Ostia Putelli, Alexandria, and Carthage connected the Mediterranean world. Grain from Egypt fed Rome itself. Bridges and aqueducts tied regions closer to urban centers. These projects served the state's needs, but they also made travel and commerce safer and more predictable than in many earlier periods. For traders and travelers, the Pax Romana meant fewer arbitrary local barriers, fewer independent warlords, and a general expectation that the road ahead belonged to a single imperial system. Another pillar was Roman law. Formally rooted in republican traditions, but increasingly shaped by imperial decrees and court decisions. It created a framework that extended across provinces. Provincial inhabitants could appeal cases through multiple levels, sometimes even to the emperor. Local customs persisted, but within a growing structure of Roman legal norms. The idea that law stood above local powers, embodied by the empire itself, gave many communities a sense of protection, though it was never perfect, and governors could be corrupt. Tax collectors could be abusive. But there was a shared vision of order that people could appeal to, at least in theory. Rome didn't try to administer every village directly from the capital. Instead, it relied heavily on local elites. Throughout the empire, city councils and magistrates collected taxes, maintained streets, organized festivals, and managed local affairs. Wealthy families often competed in building projects, theaters, baths, temples, as a way of showing status and loyalty. In return, they kept much of their local prestige. They could send sons into imperial careers. They often received Roman citizenship over time. This created a web of mutual interest. Local elites benefited from the stability and prestige of Rome, and Rome benefited from their cooperation. Peace, in this sense, meant an agreement. We will keep the roads open and the legions far away if you keep your city quiet and send the taxes on time. Daily life in the Roman peace. What did the Pax Romana feel like to ordinary people? Of course, there was no single experience. The empire stretched from Britain to the Euphrates, from the Rhine to the Sahara. But we can sketch a few lives. Imagine a potter in a provincial city, perhaps in Gaul or Asia Minor. Around the year 120 CE, he lives in a busy town with a forum, public baths, a small amphitheater for games, and a mixture of languages spoken in the streets. Thanks to peace and roads, his wares might be sold not just locally, but in neighboring regions. Coinage is predictable. He can price his goods in widely recognized denominations. He hears news carried by traders and official couriers, a new emperor, a campaign in Dacia, a flood in the Nile affecting grain prices. He probably never sees a Roman legion up close unless he lives near a frontier. Yet the presence of the empire hovers in the background on coins, in public inscriptions, in the image of the emperor displayed in temples or administrative buildings. For him, the Pax Romana means something like predictability, not safety from all misfortune, but from sudden collapses in the political order. Now picture a local aristocrat in North Africa, or the Greek East. His ancestors might have been princes, tribal leaders, or city magnates under independent kingdoms. Under Rome, he serves on the city council, funds a new bath complex, and sends his son to study rhetoric in a bigger city. Over time, his family may obtain Roman citizenship, and a descendant might serve as a governor. Even much later as emperor, as happened with families from Spain and elsewhere, for people like him, the Pax Romana could be a social escalator. Integration into Roman structures gave access to a larger world, from high politics in Rome to intellectual life in the Greek-speaking East. But there were many others for whom the Pax Romana was a quieter kind of oppression. Enslaved people, the empire's economy leaned heavily on slavery. Enslaved men, women, and children worked in households, farms, mines, and workshops. For them, peace often meant no more than that. The system of exploitation continued without interruption. Conquered peoples. Some communities experienced the Pax Romana as the time after our defeat. Revolts were met with crushing force. Cultural and religious practices could be restricted. Even when daily life went on, the memory of conquest lingered. Those on the frontiers, many border regions were staging grounds for military campaigns. A farmer living near the Rhine or in northern Britain might see legions march past, forts expand, fields requisitioned, so the Pax Romana was not a universal bomb. It was an order, one that brought benefit and harm in unequal measure. The other side of peace, war, and rebellion. The phrase Roman peace can make it sound as though Rome simply pressed pause on violence for 2 centuries. That was never the case. Violence persisted, but it shifted outward and downward. Throughout the period, emperors led or authorized campaigns against Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube. Rome fought Parthia and later its successor on the eastern frontiers. Britain was conquered under Claudius and then partially abandoned beyond Hadrian's Wall. Dacia, roughly modern Romania, was invaded and annexed under Trajan. North African frontiers were periodically stabilized with forts and campaigns. These wars were not always defensive. Many were expansionist or preemptive, to gain glory, to control valuable resources, to create buffer zones around the empire. Victory abroad helped emperors reinforce their legitimacy at home. Triumphs, monuments, and coins celebrated successful campaigns as guardians of the peace. An old pattern, war waged in the name of peace. Even inside the provincial borders, the Pax Romana wasn't unbroken. There were significant revolts, including the Jewish revolts in Judea, the Great Revolt, 66 to 73 CE, culminating in the destruction of the Temple in Jerusalem. The Kitos War, 115 to 117 CE, involving uprisings across diaspora communities. The Bar Kokhba Revolt, 132 to 136 CE, brutally suppressed, leaving deep scars. Periodic uprisings in Gaul, Britain, North Africa, and other regions. Slave revolts, smaller than the famous Spartacus Rebellion, which predated the Pax Romana period, but still significant in local contexts. Rome's response was often harsh. Cities sacked, populations sold into slavery or displaced, cultural and religious practices restricted. From the empire's perspective, these were disruptions to be contained. Once suppressed, imperial propaganda declared the return of peace, as if the disturbance were a brief storm on otherwise calm waters. From the rebels' perspective, however, peace might look like the silence that follows a crushed resistance. The emperors of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace is sometimes woven around the personalities of particular emperors. You'll often hear of the 5 good emperors: Nerva, 96 to 98, CE Trajan, 98 to 117, Hadrian, 117 to 138, Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161, Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180. They weren't perfect, and good is a heavily Roman elite judgment. But they did oversee a long stretch of relative stability. For much of this time, emperors adopted qualified successors rather than relying strictly on biological sons, though this pattern was not unbroken. They maintained cooperative relationships with the Senate. They preserved the basic administrative system put in place by Augustus, with refinements. This adoption and mentoring pattern is often credited with sustaining the Pax Romana steadiness in the 2nd century. However, the empire wasn't always so smooth. The year of the 4 emperors, 69 CE, Galba Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, showed that civil war could still erupt after Nero's death. Assassinations and palace intrigue remained part of the political landscape. Still, compared to the late Republic and the later 3rd century crisis, the Pax Romana era saw fewer regime-shattering civil wars. The system, while fragile in places, generally held culture, identity, and Romanization. Peace is not just about armies and roads. It's also about how people imagine their place in the world. During the Pax Romana, Latin and Greek became the twin languages of administration and culture. Cities across the empire built forums, theaters, baths, temples, and other structures in recognizable Roman styles. Local religions continued, but the imperial cult, worship of the emperor's genius or spirit, became a shared ritual of loyalty. Historians sometimes call this process Romanization, adoption of Roman customs, law, language, and urban life, often mixed with local traditions, creating hybrid cultures. A city in Gaul and a city in Syria might look strikingly similar in their public spaces, yet maintain distinct local gods, dialects, and practices beneath the veneer of Roman architecture. The Pax Romana, in this sense, fostered a cultural ecosystem. Philosophers in Greece, Syria, and Egypt wrote in Greek and engaged in debates that traveled across the Mediterranean. Latin literature, from historians to poets, flourished under imperial patronage. New religious movements, including early Christianity, moved along the same roads and sea routes as merchants and officials. The irony is striking. The same stable highways that carried imperial officials and soldiers also carried ideas that would eventually transform the empire from within. The cracks in the marble, no order lasts forever. By the time you reach the page of Marcus Aurelius in the archive, the script of the Roman peace is already framed under Marcus Aurelius. The empire faced serious wars along the Danube against Germanic and other barbarian groups. The Marcomannic Wars, a devastating plague, often called the Antonine Plague, swept through the empire, likely brought back by soldiers from the east. It killed large numbers of people, reducing the tax base and the supply of soldiers. Constant campaigning, forced heavy spending, and increased pressure on provincial populations. The system that had kept the Pax Romana humming, reliable revenues, military deterrence, without constant emergency, stable succession, was under stress. Marcus Aurelius, unlike some of his predecessors, passed power to his biological son Commodus. Commodus' reign, from 180 to 192 CE, is remembered, at least in the sources we have, as a time of misrule and growing instability, increasing court intrigue, reliance on favorites, and the Praetorian Guard, deteriorating relations with the Senate. His assassination led into a familiar pattern: multiple claimants, civil war, and the gradual slide toward what historians often call the crisis of the 3rd century, a bit later. From a distance, we can see that the Pax Romana depended on strong central authority that was respected or at least accepted. Manageable, external threats, economic resilience. When these began to erode, the surface calm cracked. The Roman peace was revealed to be a balance, one that could tip. What did the Pax Romana leave behind? So, after paging through 2 centuries of emperors, laws, roads, wars, and cities, what do we make of the Pax Romana? A few reflections. The Pax Romana was peace through dominance. It reduced the number of independent states making war in the Mediterranean world, because one state had absorbed most of them. It greatly reduced the frequency of civil war for long stretches, because the system channeled power through the emperor. But this same concentration of power made rebellion perilous and dissent dangerous. Inhabitants of the empire could live more stable lives as long as they accepted the conditions of Roman rule. Despite its brutality and inequalities, the Roman peace did create a shared legal and political framework that many could rely on. An enormous zone where trade and travel were comparatively safer. A sense, for some, of belonging to a larger world. When later generations looked back, they often remembered this era as a time when the world seemed united under a single order. That memory would echo in later empires, dreams, and ideologies. In the end, the Pax Romana asks us a question that has outlived Rome. What do we mean when we call a period peaceful? Is it the absence of war between great powers? The stability of institutions? The daily safety of ordinary lives? Or is it the quiet silence that follows conquest, the peace of a world where resistance has been crushed? For some Roman merchants and city dwellers, the Pax Romana meant a safer, more predictable life than their ancestors could have imagined. For others, enslaved people, conquered communities, victims of imperial campaigns, it meant living under an empire that claimed to bring peace even as it enforced its power with the sword. Here in the archive, the pages of this era are not golden. They're layered: roads and legions, laws and monuments, rebels and emperors, poets and prisoners. Together, they form a story of how a vast human system can quiet the world for a time, without ever truly silencing the deeper tensions beneath. When we close the volume labeled Pax Romana and return it to the shelf, we're left with a sober understanding. Rome did achieve something remarkable, a long span of relative stability across a continent-spanning empire. But its peace was never simple, never universal, and never guaranteed. And perhaps that complexity is the most honest way to remember it.